In this second part on customizing UI, we're going to look at boss mods. So what are boss mods? They're basically add-ons that give you information about encounters beyond the standard Blizzard UI would use. Mostly people think about boss mods and they think about the timers, but there's more to it than that. The timers are important, of course. Many important events are based on times. These could include ads spawning in, a pushback, a massive output of raid or tank damage, or other important events such as Feast of Souls on Gorefiend, where all sorts of things happen. Now, because the standard game doesn't give us timers, you do sometimes see people on forums expressing the view that to use them is somehow compensating for poor play. Well, take it from me, none of those players take part in competitive raiding, and if they do, right at the bottom end, they're entirely dependent on raid leaders calling things out for them. These people are completely unable to think for themselves. Having the timers means we can prepare for important events with split-second precision and can make best use of our cooldowns and other class abilities. You cannot do this if you are reacting, and that is better play than just YOLOing it. That being said, there's no reason why people just playing in LFR should ever have to use boss timers. It is amazing the number of times I'm in LFR and you see people complaining at others in there because they don't know about something that their boss mods are telling them. It's this assumption that everyone has them. Of course not. Bear in mind that most LFR players won't have boss mods installed. And why should they? Now, with both DBM and Bigwigs, the two main boss mod suites, the most popular ones, of course, you have two sets of timers. The first shows the timing of events that are still some way off. Then they move to another area where the event is more imminent. It's important that you think about how you place these areas carefully. The first one doesn't need to be constantly in your sight. It could be moved to the top, bottom, sides of your screen if you want. It should still be there though, because sometimes you want a bit more warning when something's coming up, especially when you're trying to time cooldowns with it. Now, the area showing the imminent event should probably be placed more prominently, without of course violating the space that we talked about in part 1. Now, sometimes a fight has so many times that it can all be a bit overwhelming. Now remember that unless you're the raid leader, you might not actually need all those timers. Some events might not be important to your role at all. Both DBM and Bigwigs give you the option of disabling certain timers, and it's always worth looking through the options and making sure you tick whatever you feel is important to know and untick anything that will have no bearing on your play. Also bear in mind some options start off unticked, so maybe it's worth going through those just to see if there's anything that those boss mods can do for you that you think, actually, that would be useful for me, I will tick it. But what if there's still a lot of important times, but one in particular is ultra important? Now, Bigwigs, it's the one I use at the moment, gives you the option to emphasize that timer. So what it can do is you can select emphasize on that, and 5 seconds before that event is going to occur, it will give you an audible countdown from 5 to 1. That will draw your attention to that particular event, and it might be particularly useful if you've got a special job to do, maybe something around interrupting or use of a cooldown at a particular point. When it comes to whether you want to use DBM and Bigwigs, you should really try both and see which you prefer. Play about with the options of each, see which one you can set up to best suit you. For many years I used DBM. I didn't like certain features of Bigwigs, not least of which is that patronising little fanfare it gives you when a boss dies. However, Bigwigs does seem to have a few extra useful features, and also, this expansion at least, the guild that produces it is currently ahead of the guys that produce DBM. This means that the add-on is updated more quickly at the start of a raid tier. However, if your own guild is behind the pace, it doesn't really matter which you use because they will both be accurate by the time you are coming to that boss. But from my own point of view, Bigwigs became so much the obvious choice that I think it was partway through Heimel, maybe towards the end, or maybe early Blackrock Foundry, I made the switch to Bigwigs. But, as I said earlier, it's not just about the timers. There are other aspects to Mythic encounters especially, where boss mods can really help out. Some of you might remember way back to Molten Core and ad management on Gar. But for those who don't, I'll explain. Gar is surrounded by about 8 adds. Now what we had to do was assign 5 of them to hunters who would use distracting shot on them, whereupon an assigned warlock would banish them. The remaining 3 would be assigned to warrior tanks who would taunt them and tank them until they'd been killed. Now this presented certain challenges because there were no raid marks back then. Doing this without add-ons meant the raid leader, yours truly on some occasions, having to select one and then tell a specific hunter and warlock to target my target. Assist me, as it's known. I'd then repeat the whole process until all had been assigned. This was made more difficult by the fact that the adds were constantly moving, and remember, they couldn't be marked. After you'd done that, someone would then say they'd clicked their mouse and lost their target. And people said Molten Core had no challenge. The point I'm trying to make is that some things are not easy to coordinate without add-ons, but made fairly simple with them. Take Hands on Chromog or the Soaking on Mythic Cormrock. If you had to assign positions without add-ons, it would be possible, but it would be a nightmare. The chances for error would increase, which means the number of pulls you would need to kill that boss would also increase. On the original Onyxia, again, there were sort of positions you wanted to be spread around for when the air phase, but people would just design zones and then had to work out for themselves how to spread out. The same applied on the original Gruul during Shatter. Now, however, we have the helpful guys who make Exorcist raid tools. So there's another add-on I would definitely recommend you get if you don't already have it. Now, these have proved invaluable in Hellfire Citadel Mythic on Cormrock, Iskar and Archimonde in particular. You also frequently find individual boss mods for specific fights. This might include Iskar Assist or Thogar Assist. Not all of them are useful, and those particular 2 I didn't find as useful as just on Thogar facing the door so you can see which ones are opening, and on Iskar the Exorcist Raid Tools one actually is better in my view. But nonetheless, it's always worth checking these things out just to explore your options, try them out, see if you like them, see if they're useful. If they're not, don't use them. If they are, great. But different people will have different preferences. So it is important to try it out for yourself and to see what you prefer. So that's it on boss mods. I hope that was of some use. If you've not been using these or not been using them to the fullest, do have a play about with them. And next time I'm going to be discussing personal notifications.